Hello, ako po si Franco Luna, Puma Podcast. In this episode,
I remember this media outlet, they asked me to record a 2 minute video. And then when it was aired live, I just thought that the most important part of the message did not make it.
we listen in on the online chatter about the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans communities and what these reveal about Filipinos' deep seated homophobic attitudes.
I understood that they had to make some cuts, and so only seconds were aired live, but I wasn't really happy about that. So, I was kind of thinking, do we really have allies in the media? I remember that very well when it was mentioned that they can be superficial at times.
That's Edda Catabas, Executive Director of the Cebu United Rainbow LGBTIQ sector. She was talking about the mainstream media's coverage of LGBTI issues in the Philippines. And she says there's still a lot of work to be done before we can call our media landscape truly inclusive.
They are actually in survival mode. If we'll talk about the reality of trans lives in the Philippines, it seems like they are being apathetic. I mean, fighting is tiring, and I can really understand why they can be apathetic.
Edda was reacting to the findings by Sin and Strat, a social media intelligence and strategy firm which combed through 400 news articles and thousands of comments in their 2022 LGBTI Inclusion Online Discourse report. And its findings on the narrative online spoke volumes about just how inclusive, or not, the Philippines really is. Here's Mint Marquez, CEO of Sin and Strat.
It's really more to do with making individuals of the LGBTI community, particularly the celebrities, prominent, and they become the face of the issue. For now, what's important to really see is that when it comes to policy, they don't get that much engagements compared to everything else that's more focused on showbiz.
The man on the street will tell you it's okay to be gay in the Philippines. That is, only if you're someone like Bretman Rock, Boy Abunda, or Vice Ganda. Of the few articles that touched on the LGBTI community that Sin and Strat analyzed, the vast majority were on topics like pageantry and celebrities coming out instead of the very real issues faced by the sector.
In this narrative landscape, when online Filipinos encounters with the LGBTI community are often with LGBTI individuals who are framed as victims, what does that make us think of LGBTI individuals, of the LGBTI community as a whole? So without headlining viral stories that also present LGBTI people's successes and joys and humanity, a disempowering victim narrative persists unchallenged.
On the surface, you might think there's nothing wrong with covering lighter topics, but Mint says the climate of victimhood starts with how the media frames the community. Sin and Strat's report, the first of its kind in the Philippines, suggests that sentiments posted on social media about the LGBTI community are overwhelmingly negative, and the lion's share of those comments came from men. When stories around hate crimes do get empathetic reactions, they mostly came in the form of Filipinos calling for the same punitive measures and harsh interventions against violence based on SOGI. For example, dapat ibalik ang death penalty was the strongest message in the comment sections in those stories. Things like genitalia and God's will were also commonly used arguments against trans people. Babae pa rin yan, lalaki pa rin yan. We've all seen those comments. Filipinos pointed to bathrooms and pageantry to argue that a trans woman is still male. Online Filipinos also thought equal rights, including asking to use women's restrooms and asking for recognition of pronouns. They thought those were too much.
There seems to be a sentiment that it's too much to expect people to unlearn your dead name, for example, and learn your new pronouns. Like, it's too much of a hassle for people to keep up with that. It's easier for online Filipinos to empathize with something that has a clear bad guy, that has a concrete face to an issue, versus a big sectoral issue that might be a little more abstract and unapproachable to them. When you see media posts about LGBTI topics on social media, you'll see that audience response is overwhelmingly negative and often exclusionary. Haha was the most common Facebook reaction on LGBTI related stories. And while haha might be an ambiguous react to interpret, we know that it often means mockery.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Joe Salcedo and produced by Kat Ventura. To hear the rest of the findings of the Sin and Strat study, check out the full episode on this on Teka Teka Explains, our new explainer series covering stories you won't normally find elsewhere. And for more content on the LGBTI community, listen to Meet LGBT Cute, that's cute with a Q, for love stories with pride. We're excited to build our community with you, and it looks like we'll be able to meet for events real soon. If you want to stay in the loop, go to pumapodcast.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks for listening.